Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Nikki Zick, and today I'm going to show you how to paint a mixed media watercolor floral of allium flowers. And these flowers, I always love to see them in people's gardens, and I did a little research on them, and the allium flower symbolizes patience, good fortune, prosperity, and unity, all things that we should be having in the world today. And also in Latin, it's the word allium means garlic, and it belongs to the onion green family. And the stems, I gather, is what they use and cut up and put into food. So I learned a lot from Google, of course, and the flowers, as you can see, I used the watercolor pencil today, and also in some of the grasses in the background, and blended it. And the rest is watercolor technique. So let's get started with the allium flowers. I already taped out my 1/2 inch border on my paper, pressing it firmly, and I already sketched placements of the 4 flower heads that I'm going to paint. So right now we're going to get our deep purple and make it a thin, transparent consistency, and we'll paint the first flower head. If it's a little dark, we can add some more water and just paint and keep it moist on the paper, so that way we can draw into the paint with the colored pencil. So we'll work on one flower head at a time. We'll let it dry a second. A little piece of hair in my painting. Fuzz. And then we'll let it dry a minute, and we'll start to draw a 5-petal flower, and that's what these flower heads are made of, all little blossoms. And I'm just going to go around the purple shape circle that I made and add these little flower blossoms into the wet paint. And when you draw with the pencil, it just blends into the water of the watercolor paint underneath, and it gives a nice effect. Where the areas are more wet, the pencil will diffuse more. You can add some little blossoms to cheat. You don't need to always put a full flower. On the top, we put a little more, and the blossom there, and the edge. So that's our first flower. Next, we'll do the one on the bottom left. Blend it out with some clean water. A little more water. And right now we're just doing circle shapes for each blossom head. And then again, wait a minute for it to dry. And then I'll go into the wet paint and start in the center and draw the 5 flower blossoms that are in each of these flower heads. They're very pretty in the garden. They stand tall above all the other plants in the garden. I'd like to get some maybe in my garden this spring. Okay, moving right along. We'll do the medium tall flower, the second tallest. Blend out a little of the paint. It's a little heavy. We want transparency. And your circle doesn't have to be perfectly circular. As you see this, if it's a little off center in the circle, it's very nice. It looks irregular, not so mechanical. And I'm drawing now into this flower head with the little petals, and in the darker areas it blends more. And like I said earlier, where it's wet, it'll bleed more into the paint. And here's our last flower on the bottom. And as you see from the flower heads that we did earlier, the paint is already drying and it dries lighter, which is good. And you know, from watercolor. This flower is a little darker. And I'll just draw into the paint. Okay. Next we'll do our flower stems. And I'm going to start off using a light apple green and draw each stem from the flower head down straight on the left. This one goes through the flower, and then the last one on the end. And also this flower and plant has long leaves growing up. A little bit thicker. A little more paint. Next we'll go back to our colored pencil. My pencils are getting used a lot. This is a lighter green, like a grass green, that I'm going to draw. It's in between the yellow green that I painted. And we're going to go about 2/3 the way up. I'm going to draw in between where I do the apple green with this colored pencil that's water soluble. And then I'm going to blend it with my paintbrush and water. And it'll blend very nicely, as you'll see. Go all the way up into your flower heads. Holding your paper, I'm pressing firmly with my pencil, and you can see the texture on the paper. That just shows you how firm of a brush hand that I have while I'm using this. Then I'll use my clean water, starting on the left and blending it in. Go back for more water. Don't puddle it, so dab your brush in between. Loading it with water. Go on the top. It's okay if you blend your stems. We'll be adding more highlights again. So just go in between the yellow green and blend the pencil lines. And as you can see, it blends very nicely and gives you a moody effect on the bottom. And it has texture like grass. Next I have a darker green pencil that I'll do in the next third of the painting. And don't go over the flower head, but touch the flowers on the bottom. Go around, come down, and make a diagonal of the darker green, going into the sky, coming back down. You could blend it in, as you see where the wet paint is and water. I can add some of this darker green and have some of those grasses where the paint was wet. Next, with a clean brush, we'll blend the second green I used. It's more of a teal green, and it blends in with the grasses. This is my first morning painting of the day. I like to paint in the morning when it's quiet and everyone's still sleeping. Okay. Next, I'll work on the sky, which I'm going to do a wet on dry technique. I have a pretty light blue, and I'm just scuffling or scrubbing along this paint, going into our grasses around the purple flower heads, adding some clean water, blending it around to create clouds, going on the edge of our painted border, blending into our grasses, maybe a little more clouds. Come down low. You can have some darks around your flowers, into the grasses. Next, we'll add some dark green accents. I'm mixing two of my greens, my forest green and my peacock green. I'm going to add some dark accents on the bottom of where my grasses are. Some of the paint is wet, which is a nice blend. And go and accentuate where the stems are. Make sure the green follows that line. Also, you can paint a little more darker green up in the higher grasses on top of the colored pencil that we laid down, so it adds a little more dimension. And that's our final artwork. It's a little wet right now, but I'll bring it close to the camera lens.